10 years ago, if you told someone that parts of Dubai would be sitting empty, they would have laughed at you. This was the city that built the tallest tower on earth, that carved islands into the sea, that turned a strip of desert into a skyline worth more than most countries. Nobody builds something like that and then lets it go quiet. But something is happening in Dubai that the official version of the city does not talk about. There are districts that were designed for hundreds of thousands of people, where the streets are clean, the buildings are finished, the lights still come on at night, and almost nobody is there. Not because they are under construction, not because they are new. Because the people who were supposed to fill them never came, or came and then quietly left. This video is about those places, 10 districts inside one of the most marketed cities on the planet. Zones that look complete on the outside but feel abandoned from the inside. We are going to walk through each one, look at what they promised, what they actually became, and what it tells you about where Dubai is really heading. If you want to understand what is actually happening in cities that sell a perfect image while cracks form underneath, subscribe. We are tracking the gaps that no brochure will ever show you. The story of Dubai's ghost zones does not start with failure. It starts with ambition that moved faster than reality could keep up with. In the mid-2000s, the city announced project after project, each one bigger than the last, each one designed to attract a specific kind of person. Investors, expats, tourists, businesses. The pitch was always the same: move here, build here, buy here, because this city is the future, and you do not want to miss it. Billions of dollars moved, towers went up, districts were named, branded, marketed. And then the 2008 financial crisis hit, and then the 2009 debt crisis inside Dubai itself, and the pace slowed. Some projects stalled. Some investors walked. Some units that were sold never found anyone to live in them. The city recovered, at least officially. By the 2010s, Dubai was back in the headlines with record tourism numbers and a 2020 expo that eventually happened in 2021. But the ghost zones never really filled. They adapted around them, built new things nearby, redirected the marketing. And if you only look at the center of Dubai, at downtown or Marina or JBR, you see a functioning, vibrant city. You can convince yourself everything is fine. The districts on this list are not in the center. The first district on this list is not the worst one. That comes later. But it is one of the first places where the gap between the promise and the reality became visible to people who were paying attention. Dubai Waterfront was announced in 2007 as what the developers called the largest waterfront development on the planet. The plan was to build an entire city within a city on the southwestern edge of Dubai, stretching along a coastline that did not fully exist yet: reclaimed land, new canals, residential towers, commercial zones, a harbor. The renderings showed something that looked like a cross between Monaco and Singapore, and the price tags on the units reflected that aspiration. More than $1.5 billion worth of property was reportedly sold in the early phases. Investors from across Europe, Asia, and the Gulf bought in. The developer was Nakheel, the same company behind the Palm Jumeirah, which meant the credibility felt real. Then 2008 arrived. Nakheel nearly collapsed. Dubai World, its parent company, needed a bailout. Construction on Dubai waterfront slowed to almost nothing. A few early buildings went up. The rest of the land sat there, cleared and graded and ready, going nowhere. Years passed. If you visit the area today, you will find a handful of completed buildings standing in a landscape that still looks like it is waiting for the rest of the city to arrive. The roads exist. The infrastructure is partially in place. But the vision that was sold to those original investors, the Monaco-Singapore waterfront, has not materialized. Some people are living there. Most of the land is still empty. Nakheel has relaunched plans for the area multiple times. The official line is always that development is ongoing. But the people who bought in at the peak, who paid for a view of a city that was supposed to surround them, have been waiting for over 15 years. That is not a construction delay. That is something else. International City is a different kind of ghost zone. it is not a half-finished development sitting on empty land. It is a fully built, fully occupied, fully functioning district that has been left behind in a way that is harder to see on paper, but impossible to miss if you spend any time there. International City was designed in the early 2000s as an affordable residential community, built around a concept of country clusters, sections of the district themed after different nations, with architecture meant to evoke China, Persia, France, England, Greece, and others. The idea was that middle-income workers who could not afford to live in the main parts of Dubai could live here, about 20 kilometers from the center, in a community with its own character. For a long time it worked, in the sense that it filled up, workers came, rents were low by Dubai standards, the clusters gave it a strange kind of identity. At its peak, International City was home to roughly 60,000 people. The problem is what happened to it as Dubai's cost of living kept rising everywhere except here. International City became a place where you moved when you had no other option. Infrastructure that was already minimal stayed minimal. Public transport connections remained poor. Basic services that residents needed, the kind of thing that gets maintained in wealthier parts of the city, did not get the same attention here. Today, International City has something close to a split personality. The occupancy rates are real, but the quality of life for many of the people living there tells a story about how Dubai treats its lower-income residents differently from the version of the city that appears in the promotional videos. The ghost in International City is not a missing population. It is the missing investment. If there is a district in Dubai that represents pure ambition with almost no follow-through, it is Dubailand. Announced in 2003, Dubailand was supposed to be the largest tourism and entertainment destination ever built. Twice the size of Walt Disney World. More than 200 projects, including theme parks, shopping complexes, sports facilities, hotels, residential zones, a safari, a science city, and a motor racing circuit. The scale was so large it was difficult to take seriously, and yet billions of dollars moved into it. For several years construction was visible. The Dubai Autodrome was built and it operates today. A few other elements went up, and then the financial crisis arrived and Dubailand largely stopped. Not quietly. The cranes just went still and stayed still. In the decade and a half since then, pieces of the original vision have been resurrected under different branding. Dubai Parks and Resorts opened on part of the land in 2016. Some residential communities, called Dubailand Residential Complex, have been developed on the outer edges. But the central ambition, the mega destination that was going to make Dubai the entertainment capital of the world, has never come close to materializing. What exists today is a patchwork. Some operational theme parks that have faced their own attendance struggles, some residential buildings, and vast stretches of land in between that were bought, sold, resold, and are still waiting. The ghost here is not a building. It is an idea that never became real, and a map of plots that changed hands so many times the original promise became untraceable. The marina in Dubai, the actual Dubai Marina, is one of the most recognizable urban environments in the Middle East. Towers reflecting light off the water, restaurants, yachts, the walk, the bustle. It reads as a success story, and in many ways it is. But 15 minutes inland, away from the water and the visibility, there is a different version of the same story. The towers that were built during the boom years in the zones adjacent to the marina, in areas like Jumeirah Lake Towers and parts of Jumeirah Village, created a surplus of units that the market absorbed unevenly. In the most prominent buildings, near the water or near the metro, occupancy stayed reasonable. But in the towers further back, the less photogenic ones, the ones where the view is other towers and a highway, vacancy has been a persistent reality for over a decade. These are not abandoned buildings in a dramatic sense. They have functioning lobbies, security, cleaning staff, but floor after floor has sat empty for years. Units owned by investors who bought them as assets and never found steady tenants, or who could not find buyers willing to pay what they paid. The buildings are maintained but not lived in. which creates a specific kind of quiet that feels wrong in a place that was designed for thousands of people. The official vacancy data in Dubai has been a contested subject for years. Independent analysts and real estate consultants have pointed to numbers significantly higher than what the government reports. When a city builds as fast as Dubai built, supply can outpace demand in ways that take a generation to resolve. In these inland towers, you can feel that math in a way you cannot in a press release. The Lagoons was announced in 2006 as a vision of canals and islands and high-end mixed-use development on the edge of the creek extension. The developers and planners said it would transform the area into something comparable to Amsterdam, a neighborhood of water, bridges, culture, and architecture that would attract residents and businesses looking for something different from the standard Dubai tower block. More than $1 billion in land was allocated. The plans were detailed, the marketing was polished, and then almost nothing happened. The site sat for years with minimal visible progress. The financial crisis is part of the explanation. Ownership restructuring is part of the explanation. But years became more years, and the Lagoons became one of those Dubai projects that got mentioned in investor reports as under active development, while satellite images showed the same empty land, year after year. There is currently a newer version of the project being pushed under related branding, connected to the Dubai Creek Harbor development nearby, which is a real and active project. But the original Lagoons vision, the waterways, and the Amsterdam comparison, and the units that were sold on that promise, belongs to a category of Dubai real estate history that does not get discussed in the tourism board's materials. The people who bought in on the original vision have had to reckon with that. Al Furjan was designed as a mid-market residential community, positioned between the more expensive areas of Dubai Marina to the north and Jebel Ali to the south. The concept was sensible. Create a community of villas and apartments for families and professionals who wanted more space than the marina could offer at a price point that made sense for a salary rather than inherited wealth. The community was built, the units sold, people moved in, and then residents started to realize that Al Furjan had all the physical features of a neighborhood without the actual infrastructure of one. Years after the first residents moved in, the area was still missing basic amenities. A metro station that was promised and shown in all the marketing materials did not open until 2020, years behind what was implied when units were sold. Schools, clinics, and retail options were sparse for a community of its size. Al Furjan is not empty. But there is a significant number of residents who paid for a vision of a connected, self-sufficient community and found themselves living in a place that required them to drive 20 minutes for things that should have been within walking distance. Some of them stayed, others moved on when their leases ended. The community has improved as infrastructure slowly caught up, but the early years created a pattern of disappointment that is visible in the resale data. This is one of the quieter ways a ghost zone forms. Not through dramatic abandonment, through a gap between the life that was sold and the life that is actually available. Everything you have seen so far in this video, the stalled developments, the empty towers, the communities that formed without services, the investors, waiting for a return that never arrived. This is only part of what is documented. I pulled the full picture together, every pattern, every signal, every number behind what is actually happening beneath Dubai's surface, into a report called the Dubai Illusion. You can scan the code on your screen right now to access it, or tap the link waiting in the description below. But stay right here, because the district at the top of this list is the one that even the people who built it are no longer defending. Discovery Gardens was developed by Nakheel in the mid-2000s as affordable, moderately designed apartments for workers and lower to middle income residents. The development sits between Ibn Battuta Mall and Discovery Gardens metro station, and for its intended market, it offered something real, a metro link, basic retail, and relatively low rent by Dubai standards. The problem started with what the development was not. The unit quality was basic to the point of attracting criticism almost immediately after handover. Maintenance became a recurring issue. The density of the development, Thousands of small apartments packed into a relatively tight footprint created stress on infrastructure. Reports of water issues, lift failures, pest problems, and unresponsive management became a persistent undercurrent in resident communities. Discovery Gardens has never been empty in the sense of vacant buildings. Its affordability keeps it occupied. But the way it is occupied tells a story about how the lower-income population of Dubai, the workers who are essential to every function of the city, exist in a part of the housing market where the rules that apply in more visible neighborhoods seem to apply differently. The people who live in Discovery Gardens are largely invisible to the Dubai that appears in travel content and investment presentations. They are there. The buildings are full, but the condition of those buildings, and the gap between what was promised at handover and what those residents have dealt with for nearly 2 decades, is a ghost of a different kind. The ghost of a promise made to people who had no leverage to hold anyone accountable for it. The Sports City complex was built in the late 2000s as a hub for athletic infrastructure, including a cricket stadium, a football stadium, a sports medicine facility, and residential towers designed to attract athletes, sports professionals, and people who wanted to live adjacent to that kind of energy. The stadiums are real and operational, though their usage has been intermittent. The ICC Academy, which trains cricket players, operates there, but the residential component of the development has never found a sustained population. The towers built to house the people who were supposed to bring the district to life are visibly underoccupied, particularly the ones furthest from the active facilities. Sports City exists in a zone of Dubai that has seen significant development around it, which makes the pockets of emptiness inside the complex more striking. You can drive past buildings that look completed and maintained, and see floor after floor of dark windows at night. The infrastructure is there. The vision of what it was supposed to become is recognizable, but the density of human life that would make it feel like a real district has not arrived. This is a pattern that repeats across several of Dubai's specialty zones: the medical hub, the academic city, the media-free zone. The concept is coherent. The physical infrastructure is real, but the gap between the number of units built and the number of people actively living in them creates a quietness that contradicts the image of the city as perpetually full and growing. The project that comes in at the top of this list is not the most famous ghost zone in Dubai. It is not the one that gets mentioned in the financial press or the one that draws documentary crews. It is one of the ones that is hardest to get clear information about, which is partly why it belongs here. Jumeirah Garden City was announced in the late 2000s as a major redevelopment of the area around the World Trade Center and Sheikh Zayed Road, targeting the space between the older parts of the city and the newer developments to the south. The vision included mixed-use towers, cultural spaces, green areas, and a redesign of some of the most central real estate in Dubai. In the years that followed the announcement, the area has seen selective development. Some towers have gone up, some older structures have been retained, but the coherent, master-planned vision that was sold the transformation of this central zone into something that would rival downtown Dubai has moved slowly and unevenly in ways that have frustrated both investors and residents who bought into the concept. What exists in the areas connected to this project is a patchwork of old and partially new zones where you can see what the vision was trying to do, but where the execution has lagged in ways that are difficult to explain to someone who bought a unit in 2008 or 2009 on the basis of what the renderings showed. The reason this sits at the top of the list is not the scale of the failure or the number of empty buildings. It is the location. This is not a peripheral zone on the edge of the desert. This is central Dubai. This is land that should be among the most valuable and actively developed in the entire city. And the fact that it carries the same hallmarks, the stalled vision, the gap between promise and delivery, the investors who have been waiting longer than they expected in this location, says something about the depth of the pattern. Ghost zones are not an accident in Dubai. They are a feature of how the city was built. The model required selling a future, not a present. Investors bought visions. Residents bought promises. The city grew in the places where the economics worked, and in the places where they did not, The buildings sat there, finished or half-finished, waiting for a future that kept getting pushed back. What this means for Dubai going forward is a question that does not have a comfortable answer. The city still functions. Tourism is still real. The center is still alive. But the ghost zones do not disappear just because new projects get announced nearby. The towers are still there. The people who bought into them are still there, or have long since moved on. The promises that were made are still on record. The gap between the Dubai that is marketed and the Dubai that exists in these 10 districts is not something the city's promotional apparatus can resolve with a new rendering or a rebranded development plan. It is structural, and it is getting harder to hide. If you have been watching this channel for any length of time, you know that Dubai is not the only city where this gap exists. The pattern of overbuilding, under-delivering, and then managing the narrative around the failure is not unique. What is unique about Dubai is the scale of it, and the speed, and the fact that so much of it happened in a single generation, which means the evidence is all still there. The buildings are not yet old enough to be demolished and replaced with something that rewrites the history. For now, the ghost zones remain, and if you know where to look, they tell you more about this city than any brochure ever will. If you want to keep following cities that are not what they say they are, subscribe. We are not done.